Feleti Teo has been elected unopposed as Prime Minister of Tuvalu. Kuroi Hawkins spoke about Feleti Teo and his incoming government with California State University's Assistant Professor for Asian Pacific Studies, Jess Marinachu, who has previously worked with the Tuvalu government.
So I'm not really surprised. I think when Teo was elected, his name kind of jumped out at a lot of people because he has so much international experience and he's worked outside of Tuvalu and in Tuvalu in these very high-level positions. I just, however, did see that the Tuvalu news media site, their explanation of how the unopposed election happened was that the only name that was put forward for election was for the PM was Teo's name. But still that is a unanimous vote there. But I think that just given all of his background, it's fairly unsurprising that he would be the one that could get a unanimous vote in this case. And I also had heard, I think it's been going around, that there's a fairly large block of MPs who are supporting him or are in the same group that he is.
Now, we know a lot about Teo from his work with the Pacific Tuna Commission, but you mentioned he also did a lot of work in Tuvalu. Can you speak a bit about that? What things has he done in Tuvalu?
So he has been the Attorney General of Tuvalu, so that's a fairly high level position. There's another person, Sir Italeli, who also was the Attorney General. So there's two former Attorney Generals there, and I think he just had a pretty distinguished background as a lawyer in Tuvalu before then going on to some of his international positions. So, I mean, fairly respectable roles both within Tuvalu and outside of Tuvalu.
It looks like we're still waiting for a final list of everyone in government, but it looks like Feleti and some of the new MPs have gone with the former government. You spoke a little bit about the dynamics of this new Tuvalu parliament with such a field of experienced candidates. If you could speak a bit to that, please.
So especially the new MPs, that's where like a lot of experience is coming in. So we have two former attorney generals. We have a former governor general in Sir Yakubataya Italeli. Mai Natalia, who was elected from the island of Vaitupu, is this major climate activist who also has a PhD looking at climate change and theology. And we have Paulson Panapa, who's a former High Commissioner to New Zealand for the government of Tuvalu. So people who, I mean, they even can line up well with certain ministerial positions as well, but just a lot of experience both within and outside of Tuvalu. So I think that's very exciting just to see all those people, it looks like, going together with some of the people from the former government who also have quite a good deal of experience. And I think that will help build up a really nice cabinet for the country.
Now, you've had extensive experience working with the government of Tuvalu, also translating for them in their dealings with Taiwan, I understand.
Yes.
Some of the noise that's been going around leading up to this election, it stemmed from Pai Niu saying something about looking at the relationship with Taiwan. How much weight do you put in that kind of talk?
Well, I mean, just in looking at it, I could see it maybe not so much as being about actually looking at Taiwan or actually thinking about leaving Taiwan, but it more, I mean, to me, what I'm thinking was a strategic move. If you're thinking about this election is getting a lot of press from people, and saying something like that also brought more attention to it. And that actually puts the new government in a pretty good position for wanting to negotiate with different partners, not necessarily China, but Australia, the United States, Taiwan as well, just to kind of have people slightly nervous about that or concerned. And you see how many people are really actively reporting on this, like people on the edge of their seat wanting to know who the prime minister is going to be for Tuvalu. So I think it actually did generate quite a bit of buzz. And so I think it's really normal for the Tuvalu government, just in my experience, to, in the first year, maybe of an administration being formed, review all foreign affairs. You look at things like where missions are, where diplomatic posts are. So it's not just Taiwan, but just everything to look at. Are you getting value added out of how you have your foreign affairs set up? So I think that that's fairly normal. But I think maybe the way in which Pai Niu had couched talking about that review had made people a bit concerned about it. And so that got quite a bit of attention.
The other thing grabbing a bit of attention is obviously the Falipili Union signed at the forum by Natano, who's out of this parliament. What is the likelihood? Would you see there being much change to that agreement under a new government, or some of the talks and debate around the pros and cons of it in Tuvalu as well?
Well, I think there was only one in the previous government, the previous parliament. There was only one person who was really very opposed to the Palipili Union. That was Enele Sopoanga. And just given that he is not, at least we know, in the PM seat, I think that probably Falipili will stay in some form. But there was a lot of talk about the need to change some of the language. And given that there are a lot of lawyers in this parliament now, I think that a lot of work will be done just looking at that language more carefully, because when you do set something down in a treaty, it's fairly binding. And so you have to really make sure that language like is in the security part of Falipili, where it's basically saying that Australia has almost veto power over Tuvalu's decisions on a whole range of security matters. That's something that may have to be adjusted. So I think that the idea of it, there are good parts that are in there, and I think people will value that, but just maybe some of the language might have to be just clarified. What exactly does this clause mean, and maybe some revisions to be made there. But I don't see it being thrown out wholesale at this point.
On the climate change front, somewhat ironically, this election has been delayed because of serious severe weather, and we have some really strong candidates in the mix as well on the climate change front. Are you expecting big things from this new group of MPs for Tuvalu?
I'm certainly hoping. I mean, I think that there was a good writing that happened. I know the first secretary in Wellington, Yone Eliuta, he wrote a really powerful piece about what was going on in Tuvalu and was able to show in pictures, which always captures people's imagination, what was actually happening that was keeping the MPs from coming back. And I think that sort of thing is really important, that people understand as they're waiting for, why are they waiting for this outcome? It's not because anything is going on that's shady. It's because literally the ocean is seeping up from beneath the islands, and there are huge waves and people can't get back. And these are the realities that are being faced with climate change. And so we do have people like Simon Kofe, who hopefully will be in the government group, Maina Talia, I'm also hoping, who are just these very powerful speakers on climate change, and Maina especially, who has an actual background looking at that. And I think that those are things that will really come into play. And hopefully we'll have very outspoken people in this government who really are bringing that message of climate change and what it's doing to Tuvalu to the international community. So I'm hoping that there'll be really good things coming out of this government on that front.